went to the park, my whole family would be there. We'd throw the frisbee, we'd have a picnic. It was just a great time. It was the best time of my life.
My most favorite thing to do with my mom and dad is to play catch. I went to Niagara Falls with my mom and dad. We went to all the cool stores that they had there, and it was really fun.
I love when my parents would take me to soccer games. I would just look on the side and they'd be cheering me on. I'd feel so great inside.
I always knew that my parents never got along. It wasn't anything new.
I remember when my parents were fighting, I would cry on purpose to get them to stop.
Whenever I was with them, they would fight, and I only remember one time they were ever with each other that was happy.
Like I used to pray every night. I wish that I had a daddy who used to live with us.
When parents separate or divorce, the responsibility of parenting their children becomes even more critical. How children come through divorce is based in large part on the parents' relationships with their children. Parental attitudes and actions make the single biggest difference in how children adjust to divorce.
After a while, I figured out that they were divorced, and I just thought that it was bad because when I was young, I felt like I was never going to see my dad again.
I thought I was going to choose which parent I was going to live with, and that made me very sad.
My own personal experience is that my parents were not friends, and they did not get along, and they did not communicate with each other either about things going on in their own lives or about things going on in my life.
After my parents would fight, my mom would basically call my grandma and talk to her, and my dad would just talk to his best friend, but no one really talked to me or my brother.
Court will call the case of Harrington versus Harrington, 05-172-221-DM. Counsel, are you ready to proceed?
There was tears and falling, down, and how can you get divorced? And that really is difficult as a parent. It just crushes your heart.
My mom told us in the car that she was divorcing my dad, and my sister and I were totally shocked because I didn't know about it, and I didn't even understand what to divorce someone meant.
First I didn't know what a dad was, but then when I turned 5, I knew I had a daddy.
Initially, when my parents got divorced, it was really hard for me because all of my friends' parents were married, and it was hard for me to see them with their family, and it's just something that I didn't really have.
Some children are very shy, or they have a very difficult time with change, so those children tend to have a much greater difficulty with divorce. So personality factors, the age of a child, their developmental stage will have an impact, and probably the thing that's the greatest impact is the level of conflict between parents.
With over 1 million marriages in the United States ending in divorce, SMILE, a program for separating and divorced parents with minor children, grew out of a deep concern for the welfare of families. When divorce happens, parents need to learn how to better understand the effects of divorce, the needs of their children, and their roles in promoting their children's healthy adjustment to divorce.
I think I became lonelier in a sense, that I was just really, I felt more separated from both of my parents, and I was kind of confused about going back and forth between the houses.
Where was I gonna go? That's what I was worried about. Losing my friends. I didn't know if I was going anywhere else. I didn't know if I was going to my mom's or dad's. I might have been going somewhere else. I was just so so confused.
I've had the occasion to interview literally hundreds of children that are in the object of either a parenting time or a custody fight. And when I first see them, as I talk to them, the things that they describe, I feel like I'm in a tug of war, or I'm a hockey puck, or things of that nature, just being kicked around back and forth. And the one thing that is so clear is that the laughter that I always associated with being a child is gone from these kids.
The education is so important to know that parents have responsibilities, that it doesn't matter if you're a man or you're a woman, you have important roles to your children. And that whether you get divorced when children are very little, or they're intermediate age, or even if they're older, the fact that you get divorced does not mean that you leave your children's lives. So you have important roles that you shall play in their lives. And SMILE will help parents understand that those roles are important for the children, but for moms and dads too.
I think we have a much larger role in the family court, and that is to try to impress upon the parents that they need to be parents to their children. Even though we're divorcing these people from each other, we're not divorcing them as mother and father. And I think that the role of the family court, and one of the things that makes the family court work, is that we have the ability to do that.
I practice exclusively in the area of family law, and I draw a lot on my own experiences to help teach my clients how to be a divorced parent, because there's no manual to teach a parent how to be a parent in a marriage. And fortunately, you can do things that feel natural as you fly by the seat of your pants as a parent, and hopefully it'll work out okay. But as a divorced parent, usually what feels natural, especially if you're angry, upset, and hurt, it's very difficult to do what's natural and feel what's natural and still do what's best for a child.
At first I didn't know what it meant. I thought that it meant like just two parents and you would just be split up and only have one, and that really made me feel bad.
I was sad when they got divorced and I cried. They were normally during the divorce screaming at each other, and then like one would walk out and then the other one, and then they wouldn't come back that night and they'd come back like the next day or something.
It's very important that parents do tell their children about why the divorce is happening in language that the child or children are going to be able to understand, without designating who's to blame, without giving the kids unnecessary details. So basic information, straightforward approach, and not unnecessary details.
And simply explain to them what divorce is, depending on the age of your children. Mine were very young, so divorce means, Dad and I aren't going to be married any longer, and he's going to live in one place and we are going to live in another. And just keep it as simple as possible, and if they do have questions, answer those again age appropriately. But I think you have to know your children and know what to expect from them, and how far you can take the discussion.
Most likely they're going to go to a defensive state. They're going to call on a defensive denial, which helps them deal with it and helps them not to become overwhelmed by this. Denial takes the form of saying that it doesn't matter, I don't care, all the way to the fact where if you ask a child, are your parents getting divorced? And they'll say, no, they're not. That keeps a child in a position of being able to cope. And initially, it can serve a child well. These mechanisms become troublesome when a child or even an adult will get stuck in them.
In my mind, I was really sad and I didn't really want to tell anyone. But then, as it got, as the year progressed, I told more people about it, and then it comforted me.
A child that is fairly easygoing, fairly resilient, has a lot of good coping skills, social skills, will do better than a child who's very reactive, who's maybe overly sensitive, can't stand little changes in their routine. That child's going to have a harder time no matter what.
I was angry at my parents because they would make me feel like I'm in the middle, and then I'd like don't tell your mom this, but don't tell your dad that, and your mom was doing this, your dad was doing that.
My dad would be out there with me, and it would push his buttons. Then then he would push her buttons, and it would just go out of control. And she would just scream out of the driveway and just drive off without even taking me. And it just made me feel just kind of like lonely, but like angry at the same time, because I didn't again, I thought it was my fault.
It made me feel like when I was in the middle of it, like that it was kind of my fault, but I don't know, I just tried to hide from it, maybe talk to my brothers and sisters.
Children have no control over the divorce process. They shouldn't become victims of it.
Studies show that when a child is exposed to conflict, that will affect how well they do. The more that child is exposed to ongoing conflict between the parents, the worse the outcome for that child.
When they talked about each other, it made me feel kind of mad because I couldn't tell if one was lying and one wasn't, because my dad would say he'd say really bad things about my mom, and then my mom would always start getting really mad at him and saying, your dad should stop making you guys tell me things when he could just call me or send me an email about it instead of just sending it through you.
I didn't like it when they were fighting, and I do remember that when they told us, I remember we had a new couch. We were getting a new couch, and our couch was in the corner, and I climbed into the couch and cried because I didn't want them to get divorced.
Parents can do terrible, terrible things when they don't like each other. They can use their kids as pawns, as messengers, as audiences, as confidants, everything to assuage their own feelings instead of really looking out for what's best for that child.
I have felt when I had to go to different places bad because because we went over Sunday at 6, so if it would have been Sunday at 1, it would have been better because then I would have had a chance to hang with my dad. But at my dad's house, I'd go to bed at 8:30, so I'd have 2.5 hours, and sometimes I had projects over the weekend and they took me a long time to do, so I had to do them at my dad's house. So then my dad would get kind of mad at that because I didn't finish at my mom's house.
I think the divorce is changing me by just the way my parents talk about each other and don't really respect each other at all.
I was mad because, he just not wanted to come be a part of my life. But when I was growing up, he didn't want to do nothing. But now he want to just all of a sudden be my dad.
The worst thing about divorce is before your parents get remarried, you have to go back and forth, and sometimes when my mom used to work, she would work a lot, and I would go to work with her, but I would still be bored because she would have to work and she couldn't play with me. And my dad, we would have a babysitter, and I would sit at home, and I would just wait for something to happen.
You always hope that they'll get along, and to see them fighting definitely isn't a good feeling. I mean, you feel bad inside, and you wish that they, got along and that the exchanges were always happy and, filled with smiles and exciting, but that just isn't the reality of it all the time.
The exposure to conflict is, again, one of the biggest predictors of how children are going to do. Children can feel absolutely torn in between two homes when they're in these high conflict situations. So if parents need to exchange the children at a neutral place, if they need to communicate by email because they can't talk in person, if they need to have a schedule and follow it, if they need to seek outside help, parents need to do whatever they can to minimize the level of conflict their children see.
Last year and stuff, they argue and stuff like that. My daddy would say he'd going to court so he can get us to live with him.
I really wish my parents would just stop fighting because I think it's really stupid. And I think there's another way that they could take care of it instead of just like this, because that's how they always tell me and my brother to solve our problems.
I know for sure from things that have been said, she has hurt a lot more than I ever believed she hurt. Absolutely. You know, you remember that? Oh yeah, I remember that, Dad. You know, that kind of stuff. So I thought, well, gosh, you know, you were in the backyard. Or I remember that day, and I deliberately put in such and such tape and closed your bedroom door. Yeah, I know. I got up and went to the door and was listening. So kids don't care about television when they hear their mom and dad fighting.
There are other reactions that children have. Sometimes they become rather angry. And they could have anger at their parents, they could have anger at themselves. They may act out this anger, or they may turn it inward. And generally speaking, you'll see behaviors like kids fighting at school or fighting with siblings and everything, being real sullen and oppositional.
In most cases, children haven't had as much time as they need to process such a major life change. It's important that you give your child time to mourn the losses and offer extra love and support. Acknowledge their feelings and accept that children will be sad and angry. And let your child know that it's okay to talk about what's happening.
When we first went to my dad's house to spend time, I would always, and me and my brothers would always plan to get them back together. We thought we could.
Well, when I was young, I wished it would happen, and we would try to get them back together, but it didn't work, so we just gave up and said it's for the best.
Children will also try and bargain. That's another kind of stage of going through all this. They'll try and bargain, and that is, if I do this, or if I get my mother or my father to do this. It's the if stage. And in that way, they hope that they can turn things around. I had a case once where a child, he was about 7 years old, Dad came to pick him up for parenting time, and he said, Dad, come up. I want to show you that I cleaned up my room. Mom, you come too. And when both parents went into the room, this child takes the door, slams the door shut, and says, you can't come out until you make up. That's a hard bargain. That's a real hard bargain. But kids will do these kind of things. They'll also think, well, you know, if I'm really, really good? What if I'm really, really good? Sometimes, what if I'm really, really bad? Or I get really, really sick? Will that bring my parents back together? Because most kids will tell you what they want is that they want for their parents to get back together.
It's in the parents' hands. The parents can control this. And that's just by trying to get along for the kids' sakes. The kids didn't ask to be here. It was a parent's choice to have a kid or kids. And I think the parents, if they decide to split up, they better think even more of their children, because now their children are at risk.
I received a phone call from a school employee who I feel thought that they were a well-meaning school employee at that point, who was witnessing my children being taken from the school by their father's girlfriend. She was not married to him at the time, obviously. And and so they felt that they needed to call and let me know that they were watching the children being taken off school grounds. I was in somewhat of a difficult situation because I couldn't leave my job right at that minute. And so, needless to say, within a couple hours before I could leave, things really had escalated. And I went into the school and I went into the office to find out that they had not been signed out by her. Apparently she had gone directly to their classroom. She also had children in that same school. So she had not only taken my children out, she had taken her daughters too. And they had gone to lunch. They were brought back. And as I recall, I was very angry. I was very angry at the school system. I was angry at the teachers. I was just a real angry person. And I know that that spilled over onto the boys. And I'm sure that I discussed it with them. And looking back now, they were going out for an innocent lunch. Somebody was doing something kind for them. She didn't have any ulterior motives for doing it. And in the grander scheme of things, did it really matter? No.
The very young children who may not even be verbal yet may cry and fuss more, they may be harder to console, they may regress. For example, the 2-year-old that was potty trained now is no longer potty trained or wants to go back to a bottle. So even though they can't verbalize necessarily what's troubling them, you may see signs in those sorts of behaviors. And again, parents are not always tuned into that because they're suffering themselves.
School-age children are learning the rules. And so they look at divorce in terms of somebody broke the rules. And that puts them in a pretty untenable position because someone has to be the rule breaker. So someone has to be wrong and someone has to be right because they're at a stage of development where their thinking is very black and white. Their dilemma is that you have to make somebody that you love the wrong person. And it's very difficult for them. It's very sad for them.
I would say anywhere from 5 through the preteen years. That's when they're developing more independence, they're breaking away from mom and dad, and they're going out into the world. They're developing skills and friendships and all sorts of wonderful things. Parents need to know that there may be regression there where their children may be more clingy, they may not want to venture out that way, which is developmentally appropriate. And you may see many behaviors of the crying, acting out nature, emotionally withdrawn nature, embarrassment, fear, anxiety. So parents need to be mindful of that.
Adolescents have their own special way of kind of letting you know how they feel, and it can get pretty scary during a divorce. They're at a stage of life where what they really need is a very secure, stable home. They go out, every day is a crisis. Am I wearing the right clothes? How can I be my own person? Am I going to be able to get into this college? Is this guy going to like me or not? And it's heavy-duty stuff for them. So that when you add this to all the other kind of peer pressures that they're looking at, drugs and sex and rock and roll, the whole thing, it gets pretty scary because if they come home and they don't have, 2 solid parents to kind of bring in the bumpers and let them know, it's okay, we're here. When divorce happens, when you have adolescents, they can express themselves in some pretty scary ways.
The other item I see with teenagers frequently is that they become pseudo-adults. They begin to take on a caregiver role, feeling responsible for the care of the parent, maybe the emotional care, fending for brothers and sisters that are younger. So it really robs them of a chance to be teenagers and do what teenagers are supposed to do.
I made a point many times to say to my kids, this, it is not because of you, and it is nothing that you have done. This is a decision between your dad and I. And I still think that that's very difficult for them to really let sink in.
The only reason that I could have thought that it was my fault is that I didn't help during their fights or try to mediate, I guess, but I was really young, so.
I thought it was my fault because sometimes they'd fight about me and stuff like that.
As a parent, there are responses you can give to help your children during this difficult time. It's important to remember that even though your role of wife, husband, or partner is ending, the unfinished business of raising children needs to remain a primary focus in order to promote positive relationships with your children.
I always felt a tremendous amount of pressure that if I was doing what my father expected, that my mother would be disappointed, or that if I was doing what my mother wanted me to do, that it would somehow impact my father and his happiness.
Conflict can be very subtle. Conflict can be a parent frowning, for example, when the children come back from one of the parents' house and perhaps the child says, "We did this," and a parent could frown, and that indicates to a child it's not okay to love that parent.
You assume that your ex-spouse is thinking things or saying things that they may not necessarily be saying at all.
It's so tempting for a parent to make a disparaging remark in front of a child. They have an audience, and they get to show their child just what they are going through with this other person. But really, that moment of indulgence costs a child tremendously, because when you criticize the other parent, you're criticizing your child's DNA.
I look back now and think of the hollering and the things that came out of my mouth, the things that came out of my ex's mouth, and whether Alicia retained that at 4 or 5, I'm sure she did.
Later in the divorce, it was more my mom telling me bad things about my dad, like trying to get me to dislike him, so I guess that I wouldn't favor my dad over my mom and like not abandon her, I guess. And I know that she would also talk to other family members like in front of me on purpose, so I would like hear things.
If I actually said hello to an ex-father-in-law or an ex-mother-in-law, they wouldn't look up from the ground. They wouldn't acknowledge me, even if my children were right next to me. And they pick up on that, and they're aware of that, and that hurts them just as much, you know, as it and it did hurt my feelings. I divorced their dad, but I still had my feelings for their family, and I try to explain that to the kids.
Well, sometimes they would tell lies about each other, and that made me sad. And like they would say like, "So somebody's sending me bad emails," and the other person says, "Well, no, I'm not sending bad emails," but then I don't know which one's really telling the truth.
You know, you need to make a more conscious effort to pack up all the clothes that I send her with for the weekend, because she needs them during the week.
But she likes leaving things here too.
Well, yeah, but then she wants them during the week, and then what am I supposed to do? She doesn't have her gym clothes for gym. She doesn't have the jeans that she wants to wear to Girl Scouts. I mean, what am I supposed to do?
Well, what you're supposed to do is come over and get them.
Come over and get them? I'm supposed to
right.
drive 50 miles out to get a pair of jeans that you're supposed to pack up and return back with her that you couldn't do? You're the parent. Do you know that? You're not the child.
You're blaming her for not packing up her clothes.
I'm
That's
blaming
what
you
hearing.
for not packing up her clothes.
I'm blaming you for not being a good mother.
Oh, wait a minute. No, don't even go there.
I'm going there because look at what she does. She forgets things all the time. She's confused because you don't teach her how to pack, what to bring, what to wear.
I don't teach her how to pack? What? This is my problem?
It's your
problem. You
problem.
are so controlling and so manipulative. You turn everything back to me.
Yeah, you're the one twisting and turning in the wind all the time. Everything I say gets turned around.
So the short run may be really good that you got a zinger in there, but in the long run, the person who will pay for it will be your child.
As parents, you'll need to reassure your child of your love and support. Correct misconceptions that your child caused the divorce. Give truthful reasons for the divorce. Accept the return of your child's earlier behaviors. Recognize that as they feel more secure, those childish behaviors will decrease. Promote peaceful, cooperative co-parenting. Create conflict-free zones where children don't have to experience you and your ex-spouse arguing over and over again. And let your child know it's okay to love both parents.
I think I was 9 years old. My mother, who was a very successful public school librarian in Detroit, received a Teacher of the Year award for being an exemplary librarian. And the awards ceremony was held in Grand Rapids. And up until that point, my parents, like I said, didn't speak to each other. I never really saw them communicating. I never heard them talking about things that parents talk about, and I had never heard them talking about what was going on with me. And so what happened was my father suggested that to honor my mother's award, that I purchase flowers for her and have a bouquet of flowers and a card waiting for her in the hotel room in Grand Rapids when we arrived to congratulate her. And we did that. We went through with that and ordered flowers, and they were there. And when we walked in the room, I was 9 years old, my mother saw that I had done that for her, but really what she saw is that my father had done that, because she knew that I didn't place the call to the florist or order the flowers or pay for them or even have them delivered. But to me, that was a turning point, because it was the first time that I was shown that it was not only okay, but it was the right thing to do to love my other parent.
You know, when you're growing up, you want your parents to be together, and there's also your friends that have their parents are together, and you know, you wish that it were the same for you in different functions, and you want them to show up at the same time and sit next to each other and at games or whatever it might be, any sort of function for school or sports or after-school activities. So yeah, I mean, as far as that aspect of it, you know, it's bothersome and it hurts sometimes.
When I talk to parents about what their children need, and I think all of us who work in this field realize that we are asking you to do something when you're going through probably the most terrible, stressful, full of heartache time that you've ever had in your life. We're asking you to do all these things, and we know that it's very difficult. We know that it's very difficult. Parents need to get help for themselves. They can't rely on their children for emotional support. If you need to speak to a counselor, or you need to speak to a clergyman, or you need to speak to a friend, avail yourself to that support so that you can be available for your children. Your children don't have the emotional development, the understanding, even the cognitive development to really negotiate this by themselves. They need your help. They're hurting too.
Games are a healthy way for children to learn and grow. But during a divorce, when parents play games to use or manipulate someone for control, everyone involved loses, especially the children. Even if this behavior is unintentional, no one wins in divorce games.
Oftentimes I was thinking more about them and the impact that what I had to say and what I had to feel, how that would impact them and their emotions, as opposed to them thinking about whether or not they could disguise, mask, or hide their own feelings in order to allow me to just have a normal childhood.
I don't think it's fair to me, because acting older than what I really am and not being able to be a kid as much as I'd like to be, I just don't think it's really fair.
It's important for parents to allow their children to remain children during this process, not to be derailed, not to become instant adults as confidants or message carriers or carriers of your woe, trying to take care of you emotionally. That takes away from their developmental needs that they have to accomplish, and they can suffer serious deficits in their cognitive, emotional, and even in their physical development.
Don't allow your child to be your ally if you're angry and bitter toward the other parent. This only fuels your child's anger toward the other parent. Let your child know the situation will get better even though it's difficult for everyone. And provide firm and consistent parenting. Have clear expectations and limits for behavior.
It's really tempting to want to make up for a lot of the pain you see your children go through. You want to let them have somehow an easier go of it, and you let them off the hook, or you're buying them things left and right. And this really is not a substitute for what they really need. What they really need now is good parenting. They need parents who will listen to them, who will be responsive to them, who will set limits to them, who will give appropriate discipline, who will praise and encourage when needed.
Teenagers worry a lot about money in a divorce situation because they're smart enough to know that there's going to be less money. And they worry about, for example, their college education. They worry about, are they going to have to move to a different house? Many teenagers will tell me, I'll stay with my house. I'm not really that concerned about which parent I live with, but just let me stay with the house.
I think one of the mistakes I've made, and I see it with other folks today, but particularly in my case, because I didn't have another adult in my house, as Alicia got older, I shared way too much information with a child. She became, even though I told her I'm your parent, I'm not your friend, don't ever think I'm your friend, that whole thing. At the same time, when I look back now, I talked about the bills.
I guess the main issue was money with my parents and that I'd have to move and switch schools and not have the same friends.
My dad, he got a wife who can help pay the bills and stuff. And my mom is just us, me and my mom, and sometimes my big brother. But like she need help paying the bills and stuff like that, cause like I can't get nothing unless I really, really need it. And well, it's not just about me, but the house. Like we gotta spend like all the money on the house.
It's not really just the money. It really wouldn't matter. It wouldn't have mattered to me if she had to pay him $1 per week or if she had to pay, $150. It was just the fact that she just disregarded it as if it was not a big deal. And I also think in that respect that it probably would have been better had I not known anything about it at all.
There were times in my own experience I was very tempted out of bitterness. You didn't pay. You didn't pay. Because you didn't pay, you lost the right to see your child. I never exercised it. I wanted to a few times. But I had a mom that told me, if you ever take Alicia away from her mother and they don't have a relationship, Alicia will blame you for not having that relationship. If you give Alicia her mom on a silver platter, so to speak, and then there's no relationship at 25, Alicia will know it wasn't your fault.
I think it's more than just the payment of child support. There's really been research done on this, and what they found is that parental attention and regular support bode well for the children, much better than either one or the other. So what that means is that if you have a parent that's like always hanging around, coming to all your games and is there for all the visits and everything, but doesn't pay child support, that's a very confusing kind of thing. If you have a parent that only pays child support and is never around, that has negative consequences.
As time passes and parents begin to date and eventually remarry, children react in many different ways.
I was okay with most of the people that my parents were dating, but sometimes my mom would date someone that would be in my grade or someone that I knew, so it would be kind of awkward for me. So then I started to dislike it.
My dad dated a girl and was gonna marry her, and then my sister and I didn't like the girl, and so we told our dad and they didn't get married.
When a parent begins to date, and typically the parent is very excited about that because they're feeling less lonely, their children feel desperate, discouraged, disappointed. It certainly makes it impossible for the mother and father to ever get back again if a parent has started dating. And parents frequently make the mistake of wanting to blend this family together, and they expect their children to like this new person and accept this new person, and it generally doesn't happen, and it may not happen at all, or it may take a long, long time.
My dad had a long-term girlfriend for about a year, and she would always be there when I would spend every other weekend with my dad. And I had mixed feelings about it. I would like the fact that my dad would be more clean and kind of on his best behavior when she was there, but I also kind of sometimes felt like he was giving more of his attention to her.
When I found out that my dad was marrying someone else, I thought that he was just kind of excluding my mom from everything and not wanting me to be included with her.
Well, now he got 2 other kids. So he don't want to. So, like, before he got his 2 other kids, he'll say he going to court so he can get us back. But now since he got them, he don't want us back no more, I guess. But he got a new wife.
Your kids are only young for a really short period of time. And then they're adults, and they're adults a lot quicker than we think. Don't waste that time. Don't waste that time fighting.
I've apologized over and over again for the things that I've said or the things that I played a part in with the separation. And, you know, the old saying, all's well that ends well. Well, I think in this case, it never really ends for a child. I don't think it ever ends. She's 25, and I know that even today, she wishes her mom was more involved and a better parent to her.
Here are some of the ways to help your children through separation and divorce. Listen to your child's worries and concerns. Look for signs that your child is ready to talk, and when that happens, give them your full attention. See if your children have any questions or concerns about the situation or the divorce. Speak hopefully about the future. Let them know they'll be taken care of and that they'll continue to be loved by both parents. They aren't to blame for the divorce, and be sure to stress that fact. Tell children how the divorce may change their living arrangements. You may have to tell them over and over again. They need to know where they'll live, go to school, and when they'll see their other parent, other family members, and friends. Keep schedules predictable. Children need this in their life. Without it, they become anxious and irritable. Children should feel that their safety net is not going to change or be interrupted. They should feel that their environment will also not be interrupted. Adhere to times set for parenting exchanges. Being late doesn't set a good example for your child and disrupts the routines. If you are running late, call the other parent to let them know. Use common sense when situations arise that may make you late to pick up your children. Call. Schedule regular and frequent contact with both parents. This can be modified to meet the changing needs of the children. Children still need to keep their extracurricular activities in place. You're not divorcing your children, and their schedules shouldn't be disrupted. Talk directly to each other about child-related matters. Stop blaming each other and take responsibility for your own actions and behaviors. Conflict has a negative impact on children. Children survive divorce when parents place their personal issues aside and place the needs of their children first and foremost. Children don't want to be in the middle of their parents' fight or disagreements. They just want to be loved by each parent. They don't want to be spies or report back on how parents are doing. Parents who fight and name-call in front of their children are jeopardizing the safety net. Conflict between parents is what really destroys children. Parents need to pick and choose their battles at times when their children are not around. Create conflict-free zones by arranging to discuss conflicts about parenting at times when the children won't hear you, such as when they're in school.
At one point in my oldest son's life, he needed to have braces, and his father felt that it was an unnecessary expense, and so I had to secure letters from the orthodontist and the dentist, and I remember quite well my current husband said to me, "We're going to stop fighting now. We're not going to fight over this, over the bills for this. We're going to pay for this, and we're going to move on, because this isn't doing anybody any good." And he was right. And I stopped fighting at that point for visitation. We would fight over right down to the minute of visitation.
The judges that hear family law cases, they have the power to affect not just the people involved in the case at the present time. Those people have the power to affect generations, children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren. I tell my clients, the way you parent your children with regard to this divorce is how your children are going to parent your grandchildren. And however you want your grandchildren to be raised is how you better plan on raising your own children, which means putting your own personal feelings aside and thinking and planning about what's really best for your children.
The best thing that I tell parents to do is, if the other parent is not parenting as you would like them to, okay, then you might not be able to direct that. Okay, you have to pick your battles very, very wisely. If this is about the fact that, the kids get a Twinkie at 10 o'clock before they go to bed and you want to go to court because of nutrition issues, you got to pick your battles a little bit more carefully. But the best thing that you can do, what is under your control, is to be the best parent you can be. A child really, at base level, needs one parent that is consistent, that is competent, that is nurturing. To know that there is, in their life, still a safe place.
While the image of the intact, happy family is shattered by divorce or separation, children can move through it better if both parents keep the focus on parenting their children. The role of wife, husband, or partner has changed, but you will always be partners in parenting. Give your child the gift of loving memories by getting through your separation or divorce with as few emotional scars as possible. Remember, parents can learn to get along after divorce and share the responsibilities required to raise happy, healthy children.
And I called them both up, and I got them each on the phone for what felt like hours, and they just listened. And I cried and told them how I felt about my experience growing up. And they each took responsibility, and they each apologized, which was tremendously helpful for me psychologically. But I think it was also very helpful for them to hear what the effects of their actions were.
Love that kid, because the reality is that you're only going to have them for a very short amount of time, and don't use them as a pawn. Do not take visitation away from a mom or a dad because you don't like something the mom or dad did.
Parents have to understand that the most important people that they deal with are their children. They're going to come through the divorce process fine. It's the children who are the ones who are being ripped apart by the process. And they always have to keep their children and their children's best interests at the forefront of their thoughts.
Children are supposed to play and be free and be light and hard.
Both parents can add to and complement each other. Both have gifts to give to this child. It is so important that both parents stay engaged and let this child know that they are something precious.
I heard a little story from many years ago. She said, you never listen, you always turn away. So southern bound you went, life's teaching made a dent. The telephone call seemed real far away. I heard they raised the tolls, costs more to get from here to there. Besides, you had a busy week and you are tired. And so we spent the days chatting about all the things you want to say. The rest we're gonna save for another day.